Hello and welcome to the Prisma ORM Query Fundamentals course. My name is Xander. This tutorial is part of a whole course playlist, which you can access for free on YouTube. For deeper learning, the extended course is available for purchase at Udemy. You'll find all the resources and links in the video description. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly promotions, discounts, and Udemy course giveaways. All right, so now let's take a look at handling one-to-one inserts. Now, more often or not, when we have a one-to-one relationship, we need to make sure there is a corresponding record. And that's the case here between products and stock management, our one-to-one relationship. Whenever we insert a product, we will want to make sure that we insert a record in the stock management because we need to know information about the quantity of that product that we have. So let's see if we can build an endpoint which will allow us to create a new product and then also supply the information needed to create a new stock management record for that product. Right, so here's our endpoint, products. Now this is going to be very similar if you watched the previous tutorial. We're going to use the same technique here. So remember, in our schema we have a product and we have defined the reverse relationship between product and stock. So remember that stock has the foreign key, in this one-to-one relationship. So we're looking at the relationship from the reverse side, from the side that doesn't have the foreign key in the relationship. So that's products. So in our schema, we've added the reverse relationship details. It was stock and stock management. Remember, this is just a single record. So we have this question mark and not the square brackets at the end here to denote the fact we potentially return multiple records. So with that set, let's take a look. So we need to load up our endpoint to ensure we capture the correct details from the request in the request body. And that obviously includes stock details as well as product details. And then we go ahead and use the create method again. So this time we're going to start from the product table. So we specify Prisma product and create the create method to create a new record. And then we also want to make sure we include the stock details when we return the data back so that we can view to see what has happened, what we've inserted into the database. And then we simply need to supply the data. Now, remember here, we are going to, in addition to the product information that you can see here, we also need to include the stock. Now, remember, stock here is a reference to the relation that we've created in our product schema. So Prisma is going to infer and utilize this information to then insert the stock management information we provide. So we then tell it to create the stock record as well as obviously create the product record. Now, if stock quantity isn't provided, here you can supply a default value. So that's what we've done here. So if stock quantity isn't provided, then we're just going to infer that there are no stock currently. And of course, we can then update that later. And last checked at, we're going to use date. Now, remember here in our schema, let's go back into where are we? So product promotions. So we're looking for stock management. So last checked at is date time. So remember, we have to manually supply this information. We are not automating that date time. So we'll need to supply the date time here. Now, this potentially is going to be incorrect because we're only supplying the date. Or at least that's what it looks like because we've supplied date here and we're expecting the date and the time. But here, using the date method creates a JavaScript date object representing the current timestamp. So we do supply the correct data for the date time type. Right, so that's pretty much it. Prisma is going to take in the data, it's going to create a new product, and then at the same time create a new stock record. And of course, it will infer the relationship. So when it creates the stock record, it will populate the other fields, including the foreign key, with the information related to the product we are connecting it to. that we've just inserted into the database. So that all happens automatically for us. Of course, we're going to return all that data back so we can take a look at it. And then if there is an error, we're just going to catch that and return a 400. Like I keep saying, there are multiple errors that can occur here. So you would want to, if you were to take this forward, to think about how to capture those errors maybe separately and report on them correctly. Right, so with that set, I do have the containers already started. Yep. So let's go into the Express container and then exec. Let's go ahead and build the documentation for our UI. Head over to Swagger and refresh. Oh, looks like we've got an issue here. So if I go back into Express here, it looks like I've made the same mistake, haven't I? I've used app again. Apologies. Right, so let's go back in here. I keep doing this. So router.post. So just a small error there. I'll go back and refresh, but you can see what happens when you do make an error. It simply doesn't appear, the UI, and then you just need to move into the container, take a look, and try and solve the error. Right, so we now have the products endpoint. Now, if you want to perform this and you have just recreated your database, you won't have any data in the database. And we need to remember that the products does require some sort of category. So what you might need to do is, first of all, insert a new category, find the ID of that category, so you can then go ahead and create a new body object for this endpoint. To quickly build the endpoint body request data, I simply supply my AI coding partner with this information related to the endpoint, and also then the schema information, and I ask it to build some data for me. And then I can utilize that quickly then in the UI to test the endpoint. Right, so let's use this. So category ID 1, I'm making the assumption there is a category with category ID 1 in my database. I'm hoping there is. And you can see I'm going to go ahead and create a new product and then supply the stock quantity. Right, so the stock quantity is actually the only field that we need to create a new stock record. Everything else will be created automatically, the last checked at, for example. And I don't think there's too much else that we need to supply here. So really just the quantity, last checked at, we've discussed that. And then this will get automatically populated by Prisma. And the ID, of course, is the primary key, which is auto incrementing, so automatically created. So let's give this a go. We may already have that product in the database, but it looks good. And there we go. So we have now the product data inserted, and you can now see that has a ID of 3, and you can see the stock information in the stock table, and it is connected now to that product automatically. And we have a quantity of 25, and the last checked at correctly worked. It is really super simple with Prisma to work with multiple tables, inserts. Prisma is doing a lot for us in the background, abstracting all of the SQL and operations needed to manage data from these two tables. Of course, from this point, from the simple examples that I've provided, they now need obviously expanding for all the intricacies of capturing different types of errors and potential insert issues that might occur. But that's something to build upon, of course. But we now have the basic framework and concept of inserting into a one-to-one relationship. So key takeaways here to ensure that this works first time. Remember to include the correct and required fields based upon the requirements of your product. So some fields will be unique. Some fields, of course, will be required. Some don't necessarily have to provide details. So remember that is the case. Where needed, maybe you can use default values if a value isn't provided by the client. Second is to remember to correctly utilize the reverse relation names in your query so that Prisma can identify the relationship and perform the operation